Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 1 p.m. session with Pascale Dubé. And I want to say it's Wellness Wednesday, so this is the perfect day for a wellness track. So, this is wellness because, Pascale, she's a leadership coach and a communication specialist. She's been on a mission of improving relationships. And, communication has a lot to do with that. She's worked with leaders and during the pandemic transitioned and realized parents need some help too, and they can really get the same type of help from that kind of communication. So I'm going to pass it on to Pascale. I would love to know, how did you come to figure out that the same leadership skills were important to master for leaders as they are for parents?
Yeah, during the pandemics, as you said, pretty much everybody just started questioning what we were doing and why we were doing stuff, right? And I realized that coaching executive, as much impact as I was having, was not really truly fulfilling for me. And so I went on a journey of, figuring out who I wanted to help, what kind of impact I wanted to have on the world. And I also had attended actually a writing seminar where I figured I worked with teenagers for a couple of years as a counselor. And so I know that audience very, very well. And I could see my friends struggling at home with their teenagers who were really they were besides themselves. They didn't know what to do. They were starting to be depressed, and the parents didn't know what to do with them at all. And working as a counselor, I was really popular with the teenagers. I was not taking myself seriously. And I really realized that teenagers, they do crave leadership. And so it was mind-boggling to me that I didn't realize that actually working with moms was something that I wanted to do, that I would have the impact I wanted, that would be a lot more gratifying to me. And that basically what I coached for executives, I could coach for parents. It's the same skill set. And communications are the same, basically. It's just the audience that changes.
Well said. You never think that way, but you are 100% correct. What do you see are some key differences when you're coaching leadership to parents versus executives?
It's the difference, I would say, is the true involvement. I mean, parents are truly devoted to their kids. They love their kids. And so there's an emotional component that you don't see in managers or executives. As we both know, you cannot fire your kids. You're kind of stuck with them. And having a peaceful home, having a place where you can really rest and enjoy the relationships that you have at home, truly is the balance everyone is looking for. And so working with mothers and with fathers is a game changer, because you're truly impacting their lives, the lives of their kids, and they truly want to change. They are willing to put in the work, which sometimes you don't find in executives and managers.
That's a key point right there. Realizing that, your home is family. It's part of the Maslow's hierarchy. So that is exactly what you would want to have peace at. You want a peaceful home. Who doesn't want a peaceful home? Comment in the chat if you can, because I know I want one. But while you were doing that, what do you think are some things that parents, especially moms, struggle with, most when it comes to their teenagers or, preteens?
I found that moms deal with a lot of emotion. They have to grieve the kid that they used to have and welcome the teenager that is now, sometimes it's a monster in the home. They don't recognize their kids. A lot of shame too, like they don't know what they did wrong. If guilt, did I fail my family? Did I fail my kid? What's going on? Helplessness too. They feel so guilty that they can't figure this thing out by themselves, because everyone tells them, you're a mother, you should know what to do. But let me tell you, teenagers, they don't come with a manual. And so it's pretty much the learning curve for the parent is like this.
Right. why can't there be a manual? I mean, there should be, here's, if your teenager's like this is what you do. If your teenager's like that, this is what you do.
There probably are super fantastic books that are written on the subject, but unfortunately books, they just tell you what to do, but they don't help or support you in the process of changing. And as we both know, change is not that easy. You really have to put in the work. And so books are great, but your kid is adapting to what you're doing. And so if you have to go back to look at the book all the time, may not be really helpful for you.
Exactly. Well, since you've been doing this for the past, almost 3 years,
Yeah.
focusing on teenagers and parents, and obviously you've had past experience with kids, what would you say is something you see over and over again with parents, the mistakes that they're making? I know you'd mentioned shame and they felt specific things, but what are some of the, I would say, not mistakes, because it's not a mistake. It's just, what are some of the things that they're doing that isn't working?
Yeah, the difficult thing is when they're really small, you're the authority. And so putting in back, boundaries, or, having the rules, they follow the rules because, they trust you, and they give you their trust, I mean, really easily. When they transition into preteen and teenager years, they start questioning your credibility. They start to, ask questions, or they push your buttons because they know them so well. And so parents are no longer the authority. They're no longer the sole influence in their kids' lives. And kids are really trying to find, as I said, a leader or people to follow and model after. And it's difficult for parents because sometimes they lose the authority they used to have, but they cannot transition into influence, which is more of a leadership skill. And influence is so much more important with teenagers because they're no longer, the small child that depend on you. They're gaining their independence. They are claiming their independence. And so authority and being super strict, or and just not being able to regulate your anger as a parent will definitely impact the relationship you're going to have with your kid. And it's unfortunate, but when you lose your cool, you lose credibility in the eye of your teenager. And so those are not easy things to regulate because, as we know, I mean, teenagers, they know which buttons to push, and do they like pushing them? Oh yeah. So learning new ways to regulate your emotions, or learning new ways to actually negotiate with your teenager, try to find a path that is a win-win or common ground, starting to let go a little bit of the authority, and start to giving them more agency into what's happening in their lives, and what type of consequences you're going to put on some behaviors that you don't want to tolerate is going to be key. You have to negotiate as they grow older, and it's going to give them more responsibility, more accountability, and it's going to make your life easier as a parent too.
So lawyers must have it really well. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, you'd be surprised.
I know. That's why I rewinded. But we have from the audience, Mo McElroy. Thanks for sharing. They said, yes, peace. I raised 3 teenage girls by myself. I found a key and did it for 20 years. Wow. Okay. You guys ready for the key? I asked them to write a list of what they learned from me. They would shut themselves in their room and slip the list out to me. I realized they were taking in what I was teaching them. A whole new way of communication opened up. I'm so happy. Like, that's great, right?
That's a very fantastic way. Yeah, that's a fantastic way to cope with it, because you have to make them think. Sometimes they take you for granted just as much as you take them for granted. And so making them think or reflect on, not what they owe you, because you're a parent, you do your job, you do your best, but still, I mean, you do pretty much a lot of things for them that they don't necessarily realize. And instead of telling them what you do for them, ask them what they realize you do for them. It's a completely different way to approach things. And it's really making them, it empowers them. It makes them think. And that's what they're about. I mean, their brains are developing, they're trying on new different sets of values, and see what works for them. And so basically giving them a way to reflect on, and be thankful for what you do for them too, trust, as I say, is a two-way street. And so it starts with good communications. This is the basic thing. And as long as there's trust, in any relationship, there's a way forward for sure.
I love that. Trust. There's a way forward with trust. I also like what you said. No cool. You didn't keep your cool. No credibility. That could be a tagline right there for all parents, right? And leaders.
Yep.
So that's really a very, I love that. I love that whole, slide it under the door. I want to use that with my friends and with my coworkers. Like, what have you learned from me? And what have I learned from them? You could do both ways, right? They can also ask you, what have you learned from me?
Yeah.
That would be really cool. So, so with your background and being a coach and leading other people to better decisions, how did you, how growing up, what was the inspiration to, I know a little bit was with, teens, there's more realization and more impact, but was there anything else in your career or your life that gave it a little bit more passion?
Yeah, actually, I come from a family of three sisters. I'm the youngest of the three. And when I turned 11 years old, something quite traumatic came to my family. I mean, my eldest sister became ill with cancer. And of course, my parents devoted time and energy to help her fight the disease. But that had somewhat of a strange effect on me and my other sister because we were left to our own device. And so to cope with what was happening, I started journaling at a very young age. 11 years old, started writing down what I was feeling like, why I was feeling like that, and started observing more, my colleagues at school, my friends. And I basically started coaching really young at, 11, 12 years old. I was dealing with the heartbreaks of my friend here, the friend there, dealing with their relationship with their parents, helping them cope with their own relationship with their parents. And so chronicling my teenage years, and it's still very fresh in my mind, because I wrote everything down. And so having this background or this experience, I think really made me want to become a coach, have an impact, because I could see that this was a very particular skill set that I had to understand different angles of situations, understanding people's motivation, and be really the moderator between people. I did that with my parents as well. My parents were fantastic, though. No complaints here, but I kind of had to raise myself in the teenagers, it was tough, but it made me into the person I am today. And I think that's why I'm so good at what I do.
Absolutely. I mean, you have a whole timeline of your teenage years, so you can even resonate and go back and hear what the parents are saying about their kids. That's a really, journaling is something that I've always been told. And recently, the place that I work, Zero Doubt Club, they always tell me like journaling is so important because it really helps you get it out of your system and then also look back and see how much you've grown. So that's pretty incredible. Maybe you can publish that book one day.
Perhaps, I don't know.
Maybe not, right? So I'm sure that there's a lot of, let's say takeaways or I'm a big tips person. I love to know what are some things that I can do or that other people can do in either leadership, or we're focused here on parenting, but what are some things that people can do today or tomorrow or this week or this month and work on to better their communication with their teens?
Any change starts with awareness. So paying attention to what's going on is pretty much, the basics of anything you want to change, you have to be aware of. So you can start by, if you start to lose your cool, just catch yourself before you lose it. Take a breather. It's always good to take a breather. I know it's quite cliche, but it's still a good thing. Take a deep breath in, go take a walk, and come back to it afterwards. Yes, you don't have to go through all the difficult conversation in one go. You can do it in a few goes if you need to. I had a client that had problems with their teenagers because they were escalating a lot. And so we implemented actually a way where the teenager called on their parent when they saw that their parent was starting to escalate, and the parent could do the same thing. It was like an oral contract between them that they would catch each other when that was happening, and they would come back to it once the emotions had settled. So that was a good way to implement, this is a small tool, but it could be a really helpful one. Also, when you react, it's oftentimes driven by emotions. And so emotions run high. Your teenager is emotional. They process everything through the emotional filter, which means if you want to reach them, you cannot go with the emotions. You have to go with your rationality. So be more here when you speak to a teenager than when you're too much in your emotions, because they will not receive it. And so if you have a tough conversation, planning ahead, just as a manager or an executive would do, could be a good thing. You have to tell your kid why you're having that conversation, plan ahead on where you want to be and what's the context of the conversation that you want to have with them. And, type a little, some types of messages that you want to come across. Don't overburden them with too much information or too much demands or too many demands. And always end on a positive note would be a good thing too, so that what the teenager receives by the end of the conversation is something positive, and the messages will stick better if the conversation ends on a positive note.
That's really good. So like, what's an example of a positive note to end with when you
You can always say, I'm mad at you, but I still love you.
Okay, I like that.
And it's okay to be mad at your kid. When we talked earlier, we discussed the fact that I had a client one day come to me with a lot of shame, telling me, I don't like my kid, and felt so emotional about this. And what I told her was, if my kid behaved like that, I wouldn't like him either. That's perfectly fine not to like your kid. You love them. That's unconditional, but you don't have to like the behavior, and you don't have to like them all the time. Sometimes they piss you off.
Yeah, hello.
And you
Just
have
like
the perfect,
right?
yeah.
I guess, yeah, you probably feel more guilty because it's your blood, Do you think that these kind of, I think you call them the 5 pillars of communication, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So do you think these 5 pillars also are useful for parents who might not have had the same type of communication with their teenager that they're striving for with their parents?
Yeah. Pillars of communications, they apply everywhere. Those are very important things that you have to keep in mind. I talked about emotional regulation a little earlier. That's one of the main things. Learn how to listen, because we are prone to want to, answer back, have the quick, reply. And so while we're talking to our teenager, we're not listening to what's going on. We're actually preparing for the reply. And that's something that you should avoid at all costs. Exactly. Right. Trust is the main thing. So anything you do to protect trust or to reinforce the trust that you have is going to be super, super important. And consistency, make sure that what you do and what you say are aligned, because they will pick on any inconsistency that they can see. And that's also something that affects trust a lot. Be consequent in what you're doing and what you're saying. I remember a parent told me that they were standing for justice, and they were doing, justice was super important to them. And we could tell by just discussing that sometimes consequences were absolutely unjust with the behavior. There was something deeply unjust about the consequence that was coming for some of the behavior. And so when they realized that this was something that was a discrepancy in what they claimed their they stand for and what they're actually doing, we could start rebuilding the trust with their teenager. This is paramount. This is one of the most important thing. Follow through. If you have to put a boundary up and you say, the consequences are going to come, make sure that they come. This is important. And so communications really is the key. And unfortunately, I think, we're so into using our screens nowadays that communications has kind of shifted. We don't really know how to react when we're in front of some another person. It goes in the business setting as well as in the families. And we have to correct course, I think.
So, that was a question that I had. I'm so glad you brought that up. I think a lot of parents struggle, and even leaders, with people always on their phone. You're trying to have a conversation with your son or your daughter, and they're head down, and you can't. It's almost like you physically have to take it away in order to have a conversation. Tell me something about that. How can we?
When we're talking about being being consistent, that's also applying to parents when it comes to phones. I mean, if the parent is always on the phone, why would you ask your teenager, to give up the phone if you're not one to give yours up? So you have to lead by example in some way. It's tough for kids because they've grown with those devices. We haven't, those devices weren't around when we were growing up.
Thankfully.
They are truly addicted to this stuff. And unfortunately, we cannot really do without them. But it affects their dopamine system. It's really, really addictive. And I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but unless there's a rule that's enforced in the home where screen time is regulated and both parents and kids agree on the modality of using those devices, it's going to be hard to implement any type of regulation or traditions when it comes to screens. And you cannot ask an alcoholic, just take one drink a day.
Right.
It's cold turkey or nothing. And unfortunately, with the teenagers and their phones, we cannot stop, them using them. Not
Why?
really.
Just kidding.
It's why?
I mean, if it was up to me, no kid would have a phone. But
there's one thing though, when it comes to communications with anybody, eye contact is super important, and that's something that we kind of lack because of Zoom and virtuality and not meeting face to face. It's something that we are, unfortunately, we have abandoned it, and kids have like 2 years of backlog that they have to recuperate in terms of social interactions. And for parents, when you have a discussion with your kid, just make it clear that when the discussion is happening, you leave your phone there, they leave your phone there, and then you look each other in the eye. It should be something that is it should be implemented, and it should be enforced. And even for yourself, much better and much easier to read what your kid is going through if they look you in the eye, because you don't have only the information that comes from what they're saying, you have their whole demeanor, and eyes are the window of the soul, aren't they? And if you don't see through the eyes, you might be missing some type of information that you need to parent your kid.
I couldn't close on something better than eyes of the windows to your soul. That is so perfect. So before we do close off this session, where can people reach you? And then 2, everybody, there's a perk. There's a female disruptor perk, and Pascale has it in there. We want to just quickly talk about that, and then we can sign off.
Yeah, I don't know which one is there. I think I put my link to my Calendly because I offer 30-minute free session just discussing your issues with your teenager. And there's also the mini course, Meet Your Teenager, where they're at, so you understand where they're actually going through, and you can start to empathize and discuss it with your teenager. And where people can reach me, I put the link to my Facebook and my LinkedIn. Just give me a quick hello, and we can start, I can help you with pretty much any issue you're facing with your teenager that are not like psychologically related when it comes to communications and leadership skills.
Incredible. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure every parent in the world can relate and get help from this. So you're making footprints in this world, and shout out to Lisa Beyer and Abby and the team.
Thank
The
you. Yeah.
next 3 sessions are coming up at 1:30. You have social media, and Cassie is running that. She is one of the sponsors of Female Disruptors. And then there's also a transformational one. And then I'm up next with mindfulness in the metaverse. I mean, you can't get a better title than that. Okay, we'll see you soon. Bye.